Okay, so welcome to the first online learning session. I hope you don't mind, I'm just going to read off the screen, which means you might see it reflecting in my glasses here, but I hope that's not too distracting. We're going to be looking in this module at Christian interpretation and use of the Old Testament in mission. And these online learning sessions have been designed to help you get a basic introduction to some of the key introductory ideas and areas of studying the Old Testament. So you're going to learn some of the key terms, get an overview of the story, find out a little bit about the ancient Israelites, and try to identify some of the key types of literature that make up the Old Testament. To begin with, though, we've got to ask the question, what is the Old Testament? And this is the term we're probably most used to hearing when we talk about this collection of writings, but in academic study, the term you're most commonly going to see is Hebrew Bible instead. So the questions we'll be asking in this session are, why do scholars use the term Hebrew Bible? What should we use in our own writing? And what difference does it really make? The first reason for using the term Hebrew Bible is fairly simple. What we call this collection of writings is going to say something about how we understand both its purpose and its significance. The term Old Testament is generally used to distinguish those writings from those found in the New Testament in Christian Bibles. Now, does this mean that they're in some way less important? Why do we need them at all if they've been superseded by the New Testament? And that's a question that's been debated throughout Christian history, and people fall on both sides of the argument, but that view is regarded as heresy. It's heresy to reject the Old Testament writings. And we're going to learn more about that specifically when we're actually on the learning weekend. One of the key distinctions between sort of these terms is the books that are included in these various collections. I see the Hebrew Bible has 24 books in 3 sections: the Torah, which is the law, the Naba'im, the prophets, and the Ketubim, the writings. And those 3 sections are then further broken down into the 5 books of Moses, the former prophets, the latter prophets, the 12 minor prophets, and the 11 books of the writings. The Protestant Old Testament has all the books of the Hebrew Bible in a slightly different order. Mostly, this is arranged in sort of a chronology that points towards the New Testament. The Roman Catholic Old Testament has all the books of the Hebrew Bible and the Protestant Bible, plus a collection of extra books, which are found in the Apocrypha in a lot of Bibles. Things carry on getting more complex. The Greek Orthodox Old Testament has all the books, plus some further additions to the Apocrypha. The Eastern Church include all of the books, and then some apocalyptic writings of Jubilees and First Enoch. So this wide variation in the list of books included in the Hebrew Bible or the Old Testament is kind of one of the reasons that terminology is important. Now, scholars use Hebrew Bible, as I said before, but the reading list is only really one of the reasons why. So the Hebrew canon is said to have been fixed at the Council of Jamnia after the fall of Jerusalem in Rome, in 70 CE. And there's no real sort of historical record of this council happening, so it's likely to be a legend that's been created to explain the origin of the canon. But the Hebrew scriptures were translated into Greek in a collection known as the Septuagint, which you'll see abbreviated to LXX. And it's called this because it supposedly came into being at the hands of 72 elders. And that story is one that we find in the letter of Aristeas. Now, if Egypt is the origin of the story around the 72 elders and the Septuagint, that would explain the wider variations of books. as the Alexandrian Jewish community had a much more fluid and varied collection of scriptures than the Jewish community in Jerusalem. And eventually, the scriptures were translated into Latin around 400 CE by Jerome, who saw the Hebrew scriptures as more authoritative and based his translation on that. Now, by that I mean the scriptures that had a Hebrew kind of manuscript available. Those were more authoritative. They were thought of being older. So, although Greek texts remained a part of the Christian tradition into the Middle Ages, these Hebrew texts were given kind of more credence. So the term Hebrew Bible then is an attempt to accurately reflect the source of the writings, as well as respect the traditions that view them as wholly authoritative in their own right. So when deciding on terms for your own writing, be considerate about who you're presenting your information and how you're presenting your information. If you're only writing about the Hebrew Bible, use that term. And if you're writing in the context of the Christian Bible, then you'll likely be using Old Testament to try and distinguish those writings in some way. But as John Collins puts it, Scripture itself is a product of tradition. And when and where you come from influences how you view and use the writings of the Hebrew Bible. So just be aware of your own bias. So I hope that has helped clear up some of the terminology there, why you're going to find Hebrew Bible in place of Old Testament in a lot of these academic writings. You won't be getting confused by that anymore, I hope. And I will see you in the next online learning session.